51, I'm on scene. I'll be assuming Caroline Street Command. I got a 2.5-story wood occupied multiple dwelling. I got heavy fire from the second floor, Charlie side. I have an exposure on the Delta side. We have one line stretch not in operation yet. Primary searches are underway. Status of the fire is doubtful. One passing command. I'm on the first line. Service speed advised. We're on scene. 2-story wood frame. I got heavy fire from the Alpha side.
Welcome back, fans of the Volley Chief. This is season 2, episode 2, and I decided to bring back our original guest. So season 1, episode I think it was 4 is when I had my first guest star, and that's Storm Ambulance Marine Division Captain Mike Witek. As a lot of people in our area know, Mike is you're like a Swiss Army knife. You work great in every situation. Would that be fair?
I've been called that before, yeah.
Yeah, like, it's like if I wanted to talk about active shooter, I can call you. If I want to talk about water rescue, I can call you. Talk about water pressure and pumps, I can call you. You have such a depth of knowledge. Talk about golf, call you. Bourbon, we should do a bourbon episode.
I said that.
So I actually asked Mike to come on because we wanted to talk a little bit about everyone's favorite topic in the fire service, the NFPA and OSHA. And Mike, I've said I think the biggest news story in the past year in the fire service in general is the proposed OSHA changes. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah, definitely a hot topic. Look how many people attended the seminar.
Right.
Recently.
And so just to give you some background, OSHA started regulating the fire service, and it's like a weird history, like anything in the fire service. It's convoluted, but the OSHA standard for fire brigade response, which is 1910-156. It was written in the 80s, and it was not written for the fire service. It was written for industry. So industrial fire brigades. Like who has one? Who still has fire brigades?
Oof. Electric boat, maybe? I don't know if they're considered a fire brigade.
Sikorsky would have one,
maybe Keyrights. There's not many factories anymore,
No, but I mean, at one time, a lot of the industrial might of our area, every factory had their own little fire brigade, or they had their emergency brigade. And that's what OSHA was regulating in the 80s. And then as OSHA grew in power and scope, they had no specific standard for the fire service. So they just pointed to their fire brigade standard, and it's very vague, right? Like, I mean, you've read the current standard, correct?
Yeah, I not letter to letter, but yes.
No, but I'm saying it's not. It is very vague. Would you agree?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
I think intentionally so.
Yeah, I mean, back then, but also too, you have to go back in time. Think about the 80s. What would Mike? What year did you join?
Yeah, 76.
Okay, so right, what was your turnout gear in 1984?
It was coat, day boots, and a helmet.
Right, and what regulation? You know what I'm saying? The standard was written at a time where there was no regulation. So
if it was there, it wasn't enforced.
Right, and it now, as time has progressed, the OSHA has identified a need to update the standard. And I think people don't realize what goes into, changing an OSHA standard, right? It's a federal regulation. It's not.
Yeah, CFR. Yep.
Right. It's not, people think like, oh, well, like, why didn't they just write a new one and make it? Like, it's not like me, like a fire chief writing an SOP where, I decree that, you will not wear a hoodie upon pain of death. But it's a process. And,
it is.
Yeah, and anybody in industry knows what a process changing a standard, an OSHA standard, or any federal regulation is. So this is actually a process that started 20 years ago, right? What did they say? They said it started after 9/11.
For the fire department, you mean?
Yes, yeah.
Yes, yeah, yep. But you have to take into consideration too how much input they need, and if anyone's ever thinking about it, please put your input in it, because that's without it, then you're stuck with whatever they decide.
Correct. And there's a lot of good information out there about it, and I also think there's a lot of misinformation about it, and that's a buzzword that we see nowadays out there. But the the standard applies. The new standard, for those of you who haven't read it yet, it gets rid of fire brigade. It classifies everything as emergency response, but it also breaks it down so that you still do have that industrial fire brigade, but also you have your full-time emergency responders. There's no delineation between career and volunteer. It brings EMS or law enforcement agencies that do rescue into it also. It's a very, very in-depth, standard. It incorporates 21 entire NFPA standards wholly and 14 partially. So for all those years where we've used that game, if you will, right, where we said, well, it's an OSHA standard or it's an NFPA recommendation, but it's not OSHA. They're kind of eliminating that. It also, the way that they've written the law is that it's applying to everyone. It's applying to independent volunteer fire companies, municipal volunteer fire companies, obviously career departments, and they're also, the way that they're writing it is it's going to apply to states that don't even recognize OSHA or non-OSHA states, and they've really made it all encompassing. Now, according to the OSHA people, the government, they said that the average volunteer fire department will see a $14,000 increase in expenditures to comply with the new standard. And as Mike and I could tell you from pricing out classes and training, it's absurd. Right? I mean,
Well, I mean, yeah, but $14,000 goes quick, you know.
oh, absolutely. And I always like to say, break it down. So we did write a response, right? We wrote a response back because that's something that you could do. And a lot of people don't know that there's a public comment period on OSHA. You could actually go and submit your comment. But we commented on just the officer training section alone. Now, a lot of people know, right? I'm big into officer training, hence the reason you're listening to me. But you would have to train every officer up to the level which they could potentially act in. So that means your lowest ranking lieutenant would be required to meet the 1021 standard of a chief level officer. And just think, with a fire officer class running for $500, $600, $700 a piece, how many company officers, how many classes do you have to do? And you've just eaten up your 14 grand in literally just the officer section, not counting gear, air packs, equipment. And I just think that it's something that in the volunteer fire service we need to really keep an eye on. But I also think that we need not be. It's not going to kill us. We're going to have to conform. People are going to get upset. But a lot of it is process, paperwork, and policy, right? Would you agree?
Yeah, well, we hate changing, we hate things staying the same. So
Right. So, and that's one of the reasons why, I wanted to get into, talking to Mike about, because in another realm of Mike's life, what, I don't even know, what do I actually call your job title?
it's environmental health and safety training coordinator.
Okay, so Mike does that for a large utility company in our area, and that's kind of the reason why I wanted to have him on and talk a little bit about OSHA, because we had a conversation the other day about the disconnect between the fire service and some industry standards and particularly fall protection.
Yeah.
Mike, you're a fall protection instructor. You teach fall protection it's like a tongue twister for me.
Yeah. Yes, I
Oh,
do. I do. Yep, I do teach those classes. Yep.
okay. And tell us a little bit about them. How long are they? Like what do they entail?
Well, as far as what they entail, you have to remember. Well, let's back up a little bit. First of all, I mean, you have to understand that every OSHA standard is written in human blood. Okay, somebody either got seriously hurt or died, and then they says, okay, let's write a law to protect us from ourselves. So hence the adoption of OSHA. You mentioned 1910, which is general industry. There's also 1926, which is the construction side. And even with fall protection standards, there's differences between the two. And to your point of training, you have to tell people those differences. So OSHA 1910 says 4 feet is the height. OSHA 1926 says 6 feet is the height. So, same agency, two different heights, two different standards. So, again, you have to train everybody to that. You have to make sure that they can recognize hazards and use their gear correctly and so on. So, it could be a full day of training by the time you get through with, showing them how to inspect their equipment, going over the different systems, figuring out how much distance you have. Say you fall and your system is deployed, make sure you don't hit the ground before your system is fully deployed, and all that. So all that's incorporated into the training.
Right. And in the fire service, as we get a varied version of that. We don't get right. Think about where do we work from heights?
Rooftops, elevator shafts, yeah.
Right. And
bridge decks,
right. And you look at the training that we receive and what we stress. I mean, go to a rope incident. How many people are close to the edge and not?
You're right. I'm gonna back that. Kind of what precipitated this is elevator rescues, right?
Right.
So and you don't have to answer if you don't want, but okay, you have an open shaft. You set up your vortex. You got the bipod set up, leaning against the wall, and everybody's you got your clutches and all your systems rigged to go over the side. How many guys are tied off? How many of the attendants are tied off so that they don't fall into that shaft?
Exactly. I mean, but go to a car over an embankment where you're using a system to bring a person up the edge. How many people are tied off near that edge?
Right. I mean, listen, guilty as charged, but you have to ask yourself, are we good or are we lucky?
No, and that's the point. Like, I just feel though you're in both worlds. I feel there's a disconnect there. In industry, obviously the fire service, we do things. And I mean, you go back to the whole, like you said, you're on a roof. I mean, we've all seen people fall on roofs. We've all seen people fall on buckets. We've seen people fall out of buckets. In industry, that's really not happening.
Well, believe it or not, it's still one of the leading causes of death in construction. Surprisingly, that old standard slips, falls, and stuff fall into that standard also. So it could be somebody falling off a scaffold or falling through a hole in a construction, building under construction and so on. But there are a lot of protections against it.
Right. And again, how much of that, in the fire service, and maybe this is our age, right? We've never been going back to when we learned things and no time in my academy, no time in any of that did anyone go over OSHA fall protection rules with us.
Well, think of a fire, right? And you got the guys on a truck are up there on a flat roof, and they pop a hole in there or whatever the case is, and they walk to the edge and they're looking down or yelling, standing literally on the edge and they're yelling down, and that's people drive by, that's acceptable. But go by a roofing job and see a guy in a hard hat and a vest stand on the edge and watch what happens.
Right. And and obviously, like you said, we've all done it. I mean, we're and the purpose of this conversation right now is not to side with the OSHA police or the safety patrol.
Oh, no, not at all.
Right. I mean, it's just, again, Mike and I were having this conversation. Mike's out teaching fall protection everywhere. And, I said to Mike, like, I don't think I've ever taken a fall protection class. I mean, I've always been taught if you're near the edge, if you're, depending on the department, the policy, the procedure, if you're within 6 feet of the edge, if you're within so much of the edge, then, you're supposed to be, and I air quote, as I say, supposed to be tied off. But the fact of the matter is the overwhelming majority of the time, we're not.
Yeah. Yep. And even now there's new stuff, when it came to retractable, personal, it's called, PFAS, not the same PFAS that we're concerned with in the fire service, but
four people just fell down listening when they heard you say PFAS.
But it's personal fall arrest systems. Now they have class 1 and class 2 lanyards because leading edge is a big topic. If you happen to fall off a leading edge where the forces are applied after the cable, your connecting device is bent over the edge, that changes the dynamic of everything. But even, back up. Oh, okay. Like in the fire service, we do things and it's just accepted. And sometimes, we have to take risks. It's just
Right.
how it is. And I get it. And again, anything I say is I'm not siding with OSHA. I'm for the brothers and sisters all the way. But when was the last time someone pulled you aside and showed you the proper way to inspect your harness or one of your carabiners or one of the gates on one of your connecting devices and things like that. So even to that level, I think in the fire service we can improve.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and I don't know what made me just think of this, right? But you think about it, we lived through, a very serious fall involving a firefighter.
Yeah,
I can tell you right now, probably one of the earliest, most traumatic events that I was involved in the fire service was
speak about Al in the elevator shaft.
no the Ansonia when
Oh, geez,
right.
yes,
I mean that was mid-90s. Ansonia Fire. They were at a 3 wood, typical New England 3 wood. They had their light duty aerial with the 3-inch line run up the center, and they had ladder pipe operation going on, and one of the members were transitioning, and
yeah.
the ladder clamp broke, the 3-inch line came off, and it blew one of the members to the ground. And I mean, you
With his
know,
air pack.
right on it. I'll tell you, I could still hear the noise of him hitting the ground. We were there, we were young, we were buffing it. Obviously, we were just under the age to do stuff, but we were standing next to the apparatus, and I can remember hearing the pop, everyone starting to yell, looking up, and that noise of him hitting the ground. I could still hear it, and it was like, for a while after that around here, I think we were a little more respectful of it. But I mean, obviously nowadays, the overwhelming majority of the members have no idea that event probably even happened, let alone learn from it. So it it's just one of those things that I think that
A lot of these guys weren't even born for 9/11.
well,
So
that's true. That's
yeah,
I guess ouch.
you're getting old.
Yeah. It's like God. I mean, when I'm your age, I'm ancient. Uh
Yeah.
but it's a side of the fire service that we fall protection, that the like you said, the industry, I guess you'd say, side of the business. I mean, even like, I'm just thinking of, right, like I equate this with wearing a life jacket, because you're near that edge, near that hot zone, near that point of no return, and you're not tethered in properly. But how many times you go to a water rescue and everybody's around the edge of the water and they don't have PFDs on? I mean, most of them are wearing turnout gear, and that's a whole, another hour of conversation that Mike and I can have about our feelings about guys in turnout gear at
Yeah.
water calls. But I just think I think sometimes we talk safety in the fire service, and I guess what I'm trying to bring it back to is we miss the what you'd call it, like the low hanging fruit, right? Like you
Yeah.
said, inspecting a harness properly, tethering off near the edge, those simple things that you could do that you usually do have time to do or could do ahead of time. And that could be the difference between somebody really getting hurt and everyone laughing a day later.
At least have it available. So say whatever. Say you got the bucket up to the roof and somebody's got to get off and you're not really sure about the integrity of the roof, or it's really, really steep, and you guys got to get out and vent it. Would I want to wear a harness and be tethered? Probably not. But would it be a good idea just in case something happened? Hell yeah.
Right.
I don't know. I don't have the right answer, and that's why you start the discussion. Where does it go?
Right. And again, it's how safe is safe. I mean, we can't wrap everybody in a bubble, but I think, like I said, it's those little simple things: making sure that the equipment is in working order, making sure the equipment is available, making sure that people know how to use the equipment.
Here's the
Making
other
sure,
thing: documenting this too, because
oh,
God forbid something happens. The very first, well, they're going to want to see two things. They're going to want to see your training records and your inspection records.
right,
And you talked about it. You said about the NFPA and OSHA. Right now, like OSHA and ANSI. Okay, OSHA, ANSI's a recommendation. OSHA's a standard. If something happens with OSHA, they're going to reference ANSI, and ANSI's typically above and beyond. Keep this in mind too. OSHA is bare minimum. It's a standard, but it is the minimum standard. Whereas ANSI will take you beyond the minimum standard most times. And so if something happens, NFPA is going to reference OSHA. OSHA is going to reference NFPA, even though they say no. That's what's going to happen in real, and now you're going to have to answer those questions.
Exactly. And I like I said, this was just the kind of the opening discussion, and we're gonna end it here. And I'm gonna cut.
Oh, we just got started. What are you talking
right,
about?
but here's why though, because we're gonna have this discussion with a broader topic, with a broader group, at our event, Hops and Halligan's. Jeremy Dinch is coming from National Fire Radio, Mike, and a surprise headliner to be named later. Another guest.
Oh, a real guest, right? Yeah.
Our
But now,
first-
what would you say today earlier? Special guest or?
I said you're. I think you're getting
Yeah.
close to being a co-host here. Let's be
Oh
honest,
yeah, okay. But I'm still not at special guest status. So,
but Mike, we're gonna have this conversation a little bit more, and I think that's why it's good to stop here, because we've laid the foundation, and we're gonna be to continued in a couple weeks.
all right, sounds like a plan. You got me all fired up now.
I did get you all fired up now.
I'm gonna have to
Go have a bourbon.
Finish my bourbon. Yeah, it's
gonna
just calm
say.
down now. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Mike, for always being on the show. You're really a special guest.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Thanks everyone for
Thanks.
listening, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit that button. Make the social media machine work for me. Until next time, we'll see you next week. FD1's back in service. Commands terminated.